here we go.
In progress.
Welcome everybody to the second session of our knit along for the mixed up stash sweater. I have both of mine behind me. Today we're going to be doing a little bit of show and tell for progress, as well as, here we go, I'll switch to a view here. A little show and tell for progress and Q&A with some finishing questions and other questions about the sweater. So I guess first we could start with maybe some show and tell. Wynn, do you want to show your sweater off? Oh, and I think you're muted at the moment. Oh, I muted everybody just so that we didn't have I was getting some feedback.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna switch cameras, I think.
Okay.
Okay, it's on a table. Can you see it okay? There you go.
Fabulous. Yes. I love that border.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun with it. I made a couple changes. I followed your advice on adding stitches and then decreasing. I'm a pear shape, so 90% of the patterns out there do not work for me. And so as you can see, it's kind of triangular shape because for a pear-shaped person, their shoulders are smaller than their bust. And so you always have to go down at least one size between the shoulder and the bust. And then the hips are typically bigger than the bust. So you always have to go up at least one size on the hips. So everything I make kind of looks like a triangle because that's what fits for me. So I tried the back waist shaping, which I think worked out pretty well. And the other thing that I modified on this was I chose to add some stitches around the, I'd say from about here back, and I did split it in half per your suggestion.
Right.
But the collar is a little bit more rounded. So I did that by increasing.
Oh, nice. I was going to ask about short rows. Okay, I see the increases now.
No, it's not short rows. I just did a knit front and back on this. And I did 18 of them either side of the center, so 36 total. Fabulous. So that way it laid down a little bit more and gave me a little more,
like a
little more collar up there at the top. Yeah.
Oh, it's fabulous. And I love the colors. They're so
yes,
beautiful.
and I had enough yarn left over to make this October hat.
Lovely. Perfect.
And I have other hats that match the sweater too. That's what's kind of fun about this mix it up is you can pull out any of the colors that you mishmash together. Absolutely. And it was fun doing the different patterns. However, I have to say that this seed stitch,
yes,
it was a little harder to do the seaming over here. And then I had questions on what's the best way to sew the pockets in, because I just kind of did what I thought I could, but there's got to be a better way than what I used.
You did a sort of a whip stitch to get them on.
I did. I whip stitched it. Yes, you can see that probably.
I mean, it's cool. Whip stitch is kind of fun and funky because it gives you that sort of very like kind of, what's the word I'm trying to come up with? Hold on, I'm coming in with you. So the whip stitch kind of gives you, I don't know what the right, I don't want it to sound like in a good way. It's like very homemade, right? Like it's got that whip stitch quality. And with all the yarns coming in to each other, like with all of our stash yarns, like the whip stitch is kind of nice there. However, with mine, I turn the wrong way because I'm in like the mirror here. With mine, I did do a mattress stitch. So I'll demonstrate for you. I know how do you do that? I'll demonstrate for you. Essentially, the seam goes on only one of the pieces. Only the pocket selvage goes into the seam of the pocket. And then you're seaming on top of the wrong side. I'll show you. I'm not making much sense, but visually I can show you this. So yeah, let me jot that down as one of the things we need to talk about today that I'll demonstrate. I'll do like a bunch of demonstration. All right, so pocket seam. Okay, thank you, Wynn. Your sweater's awesome.
Thanks. I had fun making it, and most of it was either bought locally or dyed locally, which is kind of nice too.
That is really cool. Yeah, That's extra special. So that's awesome. All right. Does anyone else want to show and tell? I can see a few faces at the moment. Oh yeah, Arlene. Okay, I'm gonna add you. How are you? Oh, and you're muted at the moment. Let me unmute you or ask you to unmute. Let's see.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, gotcha.
Okay, I didn't put it together because I wasn't sure like where to start and the best way to do it. But this I'm going to show you. This is the back.
Oh my gosh, I love the baubles.
Now,
So
these
cool.
are not baubles.
What are they?
I made it up. They're loopies.
Loopies. I like that. I love the loopies.
They're loops. I didn't want to do bubbles because I see bubbles everywhere. So I
Gotcha.
figured, okay, you know what? I'll put some loops into it.
How did
So
you do
here's-
those? So did you cast on and bind off? Like, how did you make the
No,
loop?
no. I was just knitting, and then
Okay.
I dropped one stitch with a crochet hook and just made a chain,
Okay.
and then brought the chain back into the stitch and, made a knot with the crochet and put it back.
Cool.
So
That is so
it was-
cool.
it was easy. So I didn't have any cutting
Yes.
to
I know.
do.
Yeah.
No loose
Cutting,
edges.
turning, all that stuff. So
Right.
cool.
So that I have that part done, and it's missing my other part. Well, that's okay. But
I
this
love-
is the general idea of it. I got one front done, and now I'm just starting on the other front. And my theme is actually these stripes.
They're beautiful.
So every section is going to have these stripes, but not in the same place.
Good call. Yes.
So
And-
that'll bring it together.
Is that one yarn that did all the striping, or
No,
you're
no, it's
adding, you're
all,
doing the stripes on your own? Got it.
yes.
Okay.
all
Fabulous.
separate- all
So
separate
amazing.
yarns.
Oh, I love it, Arlene. All right, and I'm going to show you how to seam the shoulders. Let me write that on my list, my to-do list. It's fabulous though, and I love the colors.
Thank you.
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
I love doing this. It's so much fun.
Yes. Did you learn anything as you
great.
were going about like what you thought you might do and then things changed, or
Yes, I kept changing my mind constantly. And I did kind of cheat a little. Ugh, there's always something going on. I did kind of cheat a little because I put the back next to the front to see how it was going to line up.
yeah, that's not cheating. No, that's
Okay.
that's the right idea, I
And
guess.
I wanted to make sure it doesn't line up,
Right.
but I have the color combination going, so it's like balanced in between.
Gotcha.
And the Guggenheim was having a show. They're having Kandinsky show on now.
Oh, that's
And I
Very-
couldn't believe what I was seeing. I saw patterns from Ravelry from shawls in
really.
Kandinsky work.
Oh,
So I don't know which came first, Kandinsky or the patterns in the shawl. I'm not mentioning the designer.
definitely the knitting. Definitely the knitting came. Let's just say that. So cool. That's awesome. I'll have to check out the show. Is it still going
Yes.
on? It's still on. I think
Yes, it's going to
okay.
be on through September.
Oh, good. Okay.
So
Maybe.
there's so many things that I saw from knitting, from the patterns. It's
Yeah.
amazing. So people get their inspiration from all over.
Definitely. Yeah. There's so much. I was at the Museum of Natural History a few weeks ago with my son, and
Mhm.
we were in the gemstone exhibit, and I was just snapping photos of all the yarns, and I want to come up with combinations that are gemstone themed.
Oh,
They
I
were
love
so
that.
beautiful. They were so stunning. So
I love
yes.
that. I love that section of the museum.
Yes, and it's beautiful the way they redid it now. So it was my first time getting in there. Anyway, thank you for showing your sweater, Arlene.
Oh, you're very
Phenomenal. I
welcome.
love the
Thank
colors.
you. Thank you for sharing your talent with us.
Oh, thank you for being here. Thanks for enjoying it. Thank you, Arlene. All right, let's see does anyone want to show their sweater, their progress? Yeah, Elaine, come on up. And you are muted at the moment. So Just have to click unmute, or here, there we go, it'll pop up.
Okay.
How are you?
All right, Shayna. I jumped into seaming last night because I thought this was Tuesday instead of today, and this is my lunch hour.
Oh goodness.
So it wasn't as fearful with I had taken your mattress stitch or your seaming class before in Vogue Knitting Live, but I had to remember everything. So I don't know if you guys can see me, but it's
oh
just,
my gosh.
I'm at the point where I have to do the band and then the pockets.
It is phenomenal. I love it's all gray, yes? I'm not seeing
and
color.
I was so anxious to show it to somebody. So I showed it to my best guy friend. I said, I have a forum at 1 o'clock and he does cycling and I do knitting. So I said, this is the same type of joy you get from your cycling.
Absolutely.
I get from my knitting. And he said, very nice.
Oh.
So I'm just so happy it fits. I mean, that's the main thing, is making sure something fits when you knit it, ladies. As you know, you don't want to get halfway done and then you don't realize it doesn't fit you, because everybody's body is different. But I'm with Arlen. I just enjoyed working with this. I can't wait to start my blue one.
Oh my gosh, it's magnificent. And I'm so glad you're here on your lunch hour joining us. Thank you. So when I show the pocket seaming, that, that'll be for you too, for everybody, but keep an eye on that. And then I'm recording this, so I will put it up on YouTube in case your lunch hour ends and you need to go. But I love it. I love that it's all the gray tone.
My friends know that I love gray a lot. I have a gray car. I just seem to wear a lot of gray and black. And so they're like, nobody has seen it except for one friend. So I'm going to show it to my other knitting group that we meet every other Saturday at Panera. I want to walk in wearing it. So I'm like, okay, even though it's not winter, I'm determined to wear this in at least for a few minutes so they can see that I got it done.
It's so magnificent. I really love the gray. I'm in love with everybody's colors. This is so exciting because in this one here, there's so much contrast between the orange and the purple, but this one's a little bit more in the same shade. And I love how yours is the same. Like it's all, it really is striking to me. What color did you do for your borders?
It's the lightest gray. I had a lot of Let Lopi.
Okay.
And so the blue one I won't use as heavy of a band. I think I'm going to use more of carrying with let's maybe 2 DKs.
Got it. Cool. Just for like a soft. Oh, I cannot wait to see it. Please make sure to share on Ravelry or send me an email with the pictures. I would love to see.
I will definitely. That's another thing. I wanted to put my progress on Ravelry, but I just had so much going on that I just kept knitting to try to get it done.
It's so hard. I even have 3 or 4 projects that I haven't put up on Ravelry yet. So I know I got to get on it. But thank you for showing. And did you have questions that I can answer today? We're going to do pockets and then the shoulder seams and how to do that. But otherwise, picking up.
No, that I'm fine with that. I mean, because I think I can manage the band. And I love what Wynn did with that collar. That looks really nice, Wynn.
Yes, the increasing. What a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
Nice hacks. We've gotten some hacks from everybody, right? Like Arlene just had those really awesome knot bubbles at the back. So yeah, this is really fun. I love this. The way that we're all talking about the sweater. It's really cool to get ideas. And my mind is running too with new ideas. So thank you. Thanks, Elaine. Love the sweater. All right, so let's see. Who else would like to show and tell? I can kind of see. Oh, Rosemary C. Okay, I'm going to add you up here. Welcome. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I only got to the back and I'm not even quite finished with the back. I have a lot of different colors. Okay. It's very, very fally, I guess. It wasn't meant to be that, but when I went looking in my awesome stash beyond, what do you call it? My life expectancy. I found some oranges and greens. I do have to confess though, I did go to the yarn store and buy a couple other balls. Okay. Cause I wanted another green. Okay.
Beautiful.
So I had to go to the store to find another green that said, this is what I need.
It's awesome. It is so autumnal and beautiful. And this makes me remember the idea. If anyone here is on the East Coast and you plan to go to the Sheep and Wool Festival, let's wear our Mix It Up stash sweaters and meet up. It's making me think of Sheep and Wool looking at your sweater.
Okay.
That's why I said that. So yeah. Oh my gosh. Are you having fun?
Yeah, yeah. I just, my sister is really impressed. Okay. She's not really a knit. Well, she does do a little knitting, but not as much as I do. But she's really impressed with how nice it's come out. Okay. I just don't know when I do the fronts and the sleeves, if, I'm gonna be able to, avoid symmetry, I guess is what it, okay, and just go with the flow.
Do you have like a super ton of the colors that you've already used? Do you have enough that you could make it symmetrical? Otherwise, I would say, and this was the suggestion previously too, like don't try to avoid anything symmetry. It's planned chaos, so that
Okay.
if you say run out of the cream that you used here, you don't have to try and match it elsewhere. So if you think that you have enough yarn that you can make it symmetrical and that's how you would prefer to have it, go for it. However, I would suggest complete chaos.
Yeah. So
And
would you say that the best thing is to just put, when I finish this back part, just put it away and then go with,
I would say that. However, I tend to have like a visual memory, and so I end up repeating things. Like there are even a few stripes in some of these cardigans where I repeated colors one after the other and didn't mean to. What I would do is more like what Arlene did and lay out the back and specifically pull a color that was not in that first inch and not in that third section. Like I would specifically plan it with the back out.
Somewhere along the line, Shayna, in the last week or so, I saw something and I really should have saved it. I'm not sure if it was on Facebook, but it almost looked like the same idea as your sweater.
Oh no.
But that happened with also another, your shawl that I did, okay, on a knit along.
Yes.
Yeah, that happened
Just
with
so up
that
to the
one
moment.
too.
I'm just so on trend. These things happen. But yeah, I've seen a lot of like funky. I know Stephen West has a really cool cardigan. I forget what it's called. Wynn, were you making it, or Debbie? Do you remember the name?
I've seen it and I can't remember the name. It was
got
really
it.
cute though.
Penguino. It's the
That's right.
Penguino,
Yeah.
and that kind of relies on stranding multiple yarns. So it's interesting the way different designers kind of take on that stranding, stash busting thing.
Okay, I also saw something on Instagram. I watched Brooklyn Boy Knits, and I guess he's going to be working for Katia Yarns, and he's looking, and this might be something, Shayna, that you're interested in, or some of the other participants. I guess Katia is looking for American designers because they're going to bring the yarn to the United States.
Oh, that's awesome. I used to get their
so they're
magazines.
looking for all sorts of creative stuff. So the person that mentioned the museum.
Yeah, the Guggenheim. That was,
they're looking for, really wild things. And I guess he's the selection person.
Gotcha. Oh, he's the person in charge of finding designers.
Yeah, okay. You can see if you go on Instagram, it was the one that he did last week.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. The other thing that was nice for anybody who knows Spanish or Portuguese, in Spain this weekend, they had like a Vogue Knitting Live or like a knitting universe thing. They had Sevilla Knits, and they had it was mostly, they showed the vendors, but they had classes also. Okay. And they had one lady that's a knitter. Okay. And does like a podcast, and she's on Instagram too. Her name is Nara, Nara. And she interviewed, the different yarn companies. Okay. And some of the samples that were knit. So like I found the names of two, one was a Portuguese knitter from Portugal, and the other one was from Spain, but they are on Ravelry, and you can get their patterns in English.
Oh, that's so cool.
Okay. You might not be able to get the same yarn, but you probably find something similar.
Yeah, that's so neat. Well, I know.
And then in Portugal, they're going to be doing, and some of those last year, I guess they're doing a virtual as well as a live, what do you call it, program weekend. I think it's June 4th and 5th. They haven't let out all the details, but they're doing virtual and live, and it's called Knit with Friends. And
that's
last
familiar.
year, that was okay. Some of them were in English. Okay.
That's awesome.
It gives you a different perspective
for sure.
of knitting
Seeing
from
Spain and
Europe.
Portugal. Would you mind, Rosemary, if you're comfortable, just putting that information in Ravelry in our group? That way, anyone who wants to access the link or whatever to the podcast you found.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's very interesting. Thank you. That's so cool.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you. And I love your sweater. Keep up the good work.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. All right. Does anyone else want to share their sweaters?
Actually, I just had a comment because my sweater, I was a test knitter. For anybody who doesn't know, I was a test knitter for it. And my sweater is sitting in New Orleans and we're in North Carolina, where I thought it would be like 20 degrees warmer than it is. But when I did mine, because I'm a bit of a dork, I actually wrote out the colors and the patterns and roughly how many inches the stripes were on the back. And then I had 3 big columns so that I would have a balance on the front where nothing exactly would line up, and where the stitches, the weight, everything would change, so that I didn't end up with a weird symmetry thing going that was partial. Because I'm great with total symmetry, but when it's just kind of, because I have visual memory too. If I hadn't written it down, I would have almost reproduced what I did on the back.
Right. Yeah, because
and then it was also helpful because if I did run out of something, I kind of knew what weight I had kind of left behind with that to put. Yeah. And I also noticed some of the, my gauge wasn't exactly the same, of course, on a seed stitch and a garter stitch. And that also let me not have something that was tight on the back adjacent to something tight on the front.
Oh, smart. That's a great idea.
I think I added some waist shaping to that one. I usually do, but I didn't want it to go womp.
Right. That's the womp sweater. That's great. So what you could do then is make an Excel spreadsheet where you write out, if you had 200 rows in your back, you could write out rows 1 through 10 were this, 20 through 30 were this, 31 through 60 were this, and then do other columns on that spreadsheet. That's really cool.
Yeah, and I just did inches because I didn't want to get myself crazy, and I didn't want it to be that precise. But doing the inches meant that if I had something that was an inch, and 4 inches, I would not pick something that was 6 inches on the back, because then the break would be in the same place.
Understood. Got it. Very cool. And actually, taking back what I said about the inches, about row counts, maybe you don't even want to do row counts, since the gauges are all different from your yarns. Even if it's 200 rows on the back, it might be 190 on the front or something like that. So I take it back. Go with Debbie's idea of the inches, not the rows. But and your sweater is phenomenal. I wonder if I can pull it up. Hold on. I should have. Let's see. Let me find it, because I love your sweater. I love them all
the time. It's great for traveling because I can stuff it into something really, really small, but then as soon as I pull it out, it's cozy.
All right, here we go. Let me share the screen. So these are the projects. Let's find, oops, there you go. Oh, Wynn, there's your sweater. But this is Debbie's sweater. It's so gorgeous. I mean, they all are. I really have to say, it just feels so good to me to see all of your sweaters and love each and every single one of them. I feel like this was a great design for that reason, because we take all the yarn we love in our stash, and then we've turned it into this incredibly beautiful piece that's totally unique and totally ours. So thank you all for being there on this journey with me. Oh, and thank you, Debbie, for that great idea. I love it. To have your a spreadsheet almost, or a list of your inches. So yeah, before I do some demonstrations, did anybody else want to share? No pressure, of course. All right. And of course, I can do a demonstration, and then we can go back to sharing if anyone has questions or wants to show their progress. Okay. So we had questions about the pocket seam and questions about shoulder seaming. So let's make sure I cover those, and then I'll do a quick demo of picking up stitches as well. All right, so this is going to be very wacky because I've got all different types of swatches here. You'll see as I change my camera. So we'll start with the shoulder seam. Basically, you're going to have stitches, pardon my cables here. They're lovely, but they're not meant to be what we're seaming. So part of what we want to do, let me just find another swatch here. Okay. I'll use this too. It'll be awkward. Okay. So as we're seaming together the shoulders, we're going to have stitches to stitches that we've bound off. So starting at the very outer edge of the sweater. So if we've got our sweater, you've got your back piece that kind of looks like this. Ish, right? You've got your front piece that looks like this. Oh, same thing, that curve and then straight down. That's your front piece and your back piece. And then you've got the other front, of course, right here. Pardon my neck. You're going to seam this together for the neck, the back tabs. And then you're going to start here and seam across, or you can start in the middle and seam halfway down on one side and the other half on the other. But I'll just demonstrate for you how to seam. These are going to be a little different actually, because you'll have bound off stitches, and then this is going to be rows. Your stitches are sitting a little differently this way. So there are two types of seams you're going to encounter here. The first one, if we were to start at the outer edge, is going to be a stitch to stitch seam. So a stitch in knitting looks like a little letter V as in Victor. There's another little V. They kind of point down, the two little dips there. In between two V's is an A. All right, so on this side of the work, I'm going to pick up an A at the bottom. And over here, I'm going to pick up a V. So you're going to repeat that across the sweater for the shoulder, and it should work out equally because you'll have the same number of stitches on the front and the back for the shoulder. And then when you get to the center neck, it changes. But here I'm going to pick up an A, and here I'm going to pick up a V.
Hey, Shayna, I deliberately did stockinette for that seam.
Correct, yes. And I think in the pattern, I recommended that the top parts of the sweater are stockinette so that you, when you have your stair steps, you're not encountering any weird stitches like pearls that might throw someone off. So I'm glad you did that. But yeah, so here I grabbed a V, every single V at the top and every A at the bottom, and you do a seam for about an inch or two, and then you tighten it. You pull it tight and you get this look here. So you would sew your shoulder together like that. And there's a seam on the back. You would sew your shoulder together until you got to the neck. When you get to the neck, your stitches turned on the sweater. So like right here, your front came up to here, and then you have that little tab here. So instead of seaming a V to an A, you're actually seaming the side of the work to an A. So we're still picking up an A at the bottom. We'll pretend this is normal stitching and not ribbing. You're still seaming an A here, but instead of going to a V, because that's this way, we want to be along the side of the seam. We're picking up in the bar that's in the middle of the seam. So you're seaming the bars to the A's. There's an A hiding under a purl stitch, and then another bar, or two bars if you need to fit it in. So there, it does shift at the neck. Right here, where you have that little extra tab in the back neck of the sweater, the stitches change direction. So instead of the V to A, which you would have been doing predominantly here, so these A's go all the way up, but here the stitches shifted right here, and then you end up with stitches along their sides. You would pick up the bars, and then on the side seams your stitches sit vertically, so you're going to pick up bars to bars to get the side seams done, but that's later. So your first step is to put this whole seam together to connect the front to the back after the front tabs have been sewn together. Then you pick up stitches from here to here to make the sleeve. After you've done the sleeve, then you basically fold the sweater in half, seam this to this, and this to this. So that's how the seaming works on that. And my recommendation is Mattress Stitch, although I did really like Wynn's Whip Stitch on the pockets because I thought that added kind of like an easygoing, natural look to the sweater. So something to think about. All right, and now in terms of sewing the pockets on, such a good question. I do a mattress stitch. This, what I just demonstrated was a quick mattress stitch. And I do have some tiny tutorials on my YouTube channel also for mattress stitch, but I still do a mattress stitch for the pocket here. So let's pretend that my pink yarn is the pocket and the white is my sweater. We'll pretend, we'll just say like, oh, here's the pocket. Okay, I'll tuck in the other stuff. Using tails from either the sweater or a new piece of yarn in the pocket color, you're going to count out or measure out from the sides and from the bottom to find the exact corner on which you want to seam your pocket. That way you have symmetry when you go for the other side, that you know you are 8 stitches away and 6 rows up from the ribbing when you start this corner of the pocket. So I try to be very precise about that when I'm sewing pockets on to make sure I have symmetry. And then once I have that, I come to the side here. And what I do is I dive in and I grab 2 bars on the fabric of my sweater. Remember, the white is my sweater. And then I dive into the pocket and I also grab 2 bars. I'll do a little bit more of this than I did of the other seam so you can see. So I'm going in this same line, grabbing 2 bars of knitting. And I'm sorry, I didn't do my nails today. I just realized, okay, oops. Then here, I'm going to dive in this same column here and grab 2 bars. You'll notice this little curl of my pocket is going on the inside of the pocket. So here we go. I've got 2 bars, 2 bars. So I'm staying in these same lines, these same railroad tracks, so to speak. And no matter what stitch pattern you've done on your sweater, so if you have double moss, if you have the moss stitch, if you have seed stitch, if you have a rib, you will still have these columns. So I did pull out another pattern, although no, we'll just keep going here. So garter stitch, you still end up with bars. You can still find these little bars to seam into. Okay, you get the idea though. So this is a mattress stitch here. And you'll notice right here, that's going to be my seam on the inside of the pocket. So once I pull it tight, the pocket is then set in to the sweater kind of smoothly here. And then on the inside, I do have a seam. I do have the seam right there on the inside, but it's only the pocket seam. So typically on a sweater, when I seam, I've got 1 selvage from one side and 1 selvage from the other. Here, the only selvage is the pocket piece. And then on the back, you can see the seam here, where typically you wouldn't see that kind of stitching, but since we're seaming on a flat piece, you're getting that. And then at the bottom of the work, I'll just grab yarns that I have handy. On the bottom of the work, it's the same concept as the shoulder seam. So a V, again, pardon me for my edging there. I'm just using the tail to an A, a V. So same concept with the mattress stitch to an A. It's a little trickier, I find, to stay in the same row here. It's kind of hard to see it. So an A to the V up here. An A. So if you have some sort of multicolor or a stitch pattern here where it's easy to see the rows that you've got going on, then you're lucky, because I always find I have to really pay attention to make sure that I've stayed in the same row going across. But that's the idea for this part of the seam, for when you get the bottom, the cast on edge to the bottom of the sweater. But that's the idea. So it's just like your shoulder seam, and same as the side seam, you have the selvage going on inside from the pocket. And on the back, well, I did it in white, so it's going to be harder to see, but on the back, you would have the same kind of seam that you did from the pink. Does that make sense, Wynn, what I did? Let's see.
Yeah, and that doesn't shorten it at all there?
Not too much, no. I mean, maybe like there's a little bit of a wave here, let's call it, I guess, where there's a pulling in, but it's not, this won't shorten the gauge here. If you end up with, say, if you're seaming this to, say, hold on, trying to see if I have a swatch of garter.
Yeah, that's what it was garter for me.
Yeah, if you're doing garter, then you may have to pin this out just to kind of see where it naturally lies with the back fabric, and kind of give yourself goalposts of like, okay, here's the halfway point. I'm going to make sure this fits into the garter to the halfway point. And then from here to here, I need to pin that to make sure that this gets to there because of the discrepancies in row gauge. Here, like the gauge is here actually off, right? They're two different yarns. So this one, maybe I'm getting 5 or 6 rows to the inch, and this one I'm getting 8 rows to the inch. So what one can do to combat that, if you can figure out your row gauge discrepancy between your 2 stitch patterns, if I have more rows in this yarn, I'm going to take 2 bars from here, so 2 rows, and then a single here and there. So I have more rows in my white. I'm going to take 2 and 2. 2 from my white, 2 from my pink, and then every so often I would take 2 from the white and just 1 from the pink, 1 from the shorter side to help them even out. So what that's ending up doing is actually stretching out my pink to meet the gauge of the white. So you could do that with different stitch patterns too. For example, garter stitch, which of course I can't find a garter swatch. Garter stitch tends to be condensed, right? Every 2 rows is almost the same as 1 stitch. So for garter stitch, what you may do is take like 2 bars of garter ridge to 1 row here. So 2 garter rows to 1 stockinette or rib row. Hope that makes sense.
What about that third edge? The other side of the
Same
pocket?
thing, as it would be the same seam as the side.
But
So
do
I
you
would
have
need
to lay it out a little differently because you already seem to?
Oh, this one has pockets too. Good. Oh, these are a little different. They were inset as I went. However, what I do here is I want to make sure, or I'll show you on this sweater, at the front corner here, I made sure I was 4 stitches in, 4 stitches in. And then if I'm seaming my pocket exactly the same row to row for what's on the bottom, if I'm starting my yarn here and going this way and starting my yarn here, although you wouldn't really do that because then you're seaming backwards, but you can count out, if you have 20 pocket stitches, you count out 20 stitches and you start seaming there over. These are going to match widthwise. So if they're on the same plane, they're going to match exactly across the same way. And then vertically, they should match the same way too. And now I've forgotten what your question is, and I'm not sure I answered it.
It was more about the manipulation of that third side onto the fabric. Because, you know, when you first start, it's easy to do it. And as you keep adding more of the pocket being attached, that last side would be the toughest, I would think.
Yes. So you end up with a tail, right, from casting on your pocket. So I make a long tail and I seam this part over and this part up. And then sometimes if my other tail's up here, I'll seam straight down. And yes, there sometimes is that little like inch or 2 where it's very awkward to get above and below because the pocket is curling under. So you could, if you don't mind having extra tails, you could start your one tail here, seam and seam, and those were both open edges, easy to do. And then start another fresh tail here and go straight up with a seam, which would also make it open and easy so that you're ending at the tops of your pockets where you don't get backed into a corner. So what you're saying, for anyone else here who's not understanding, I guess what we're saying is Wynn's talking about seaming yourself into a hole where you don't have the open fabrics that you can manipulate and bring your needle up and down. All of a sudden your fabrics are closing in. If you have this all seamed up and you're seaming down to here, all of a sudden you have these 2 spots on each side of the seam where you really have to kind of wiggle your needle in It's one of the reasons it drives me crazy when sweater patterns call for people to seam up the sides, seam your shoulders, seam your side seam, and then leave a big hole for your armhole, and then set the sleeve into that hole. It drives me berserk because it's so hard to set something into a circle. It's much easier if you can have your sweater laying flat, which is essentially what I had everybody do on this sweater, right? You seam your top and your bottom, or your front and your back, excuse me, and then you attach the armhole and work down. And I seam the same way. So let's say I had a finished sleeve. I attach my front and back, and then I inset my sleeve, and then I do my final seams of A to A, which is my sleeve seam, and B to B for the side seam. So I got very technical there. I hope everyone's okay with that. But yeah, so interesting. That's a very cool questions. Thank you, Wynn. I appreciate it. Yeah. How's everyone doing otherwise? Does anyone want to, did you decide on anyone to show and tell? Anyone want to show? Otherwise, I can demonstrate how to pick up stitches around the side of the work, if you'd like to see that, for your front bands. Let me know. All right. Okay, I'll demonstrate that, and then we can chat for a few minutes and catch up on what else you're knitting now that you've knit so much stash. You can go ahead and just go wild at the yarn store. Let's see. Or maybe you did for this sweater, I don't know. It is, I had to supplement my yarns at the yarn store to make sure I had the right color. Like this one, again, I did it. This one is a strand of alpaca, and I did not have that in stash that I used as my carry along yarn. So that one I had to get at the yarn shop. It was quite fun going to the yarn shop. Okay, so picking up in the pattern, I recommend that you place a marker at the back seam where the two front neck pieces came together at the back, so that you can count your stitches at that point. And what you're going to do is start at the bottom right and work all the way around the sweater picking up stitches. And the rate at which you pick up stitches is 3 stitches for every 4 rows, except in garter stitch. In garter stitch, it's 1 stitch for every ridge of garter. And again, here's a garter swatch. Found one. Okay. Yes. Question? Everyone good? All right. So to pick up stitches, let's see. You're going to work with the right side facing, so the front of your sweater facing. You're going to start at the bottom right corner of your sweater. So whenever a pattern calls for right or left, if I say right front in my pattern or left front, it's as you wear it. So the bottom right front would be on your right side as you're wearing it. So even if you're knitting a baby sweater and they say right front, pretend the baby is wearing it. And that's how you figure out. So I always end up putting my hand on my body, remembering which side is my right and my left. Okay. So to pick up stitches here in stockinette, or if you're doing your double moss stitch, whatever stitch pattern other than garter stitch, you're going to start at the very corner, insert your needle in, wrap the yarn like you're knitting, and pull through 1 stitch. So I'm inserting my needle into this hole, wrapping my yarn around the needle like I'm knitting, and bring it through to the right side. And I'm going to do that a 3rd time. So every row, one after the other. And I'm doing this in the same column that I would have seamed it. So I'm leaving about an inch selvage at this, a stitch selvage at the side. So I've picked up 3 stitches. This would be my 4th row. In order to make the band sit nicely and not pucker and wave, I'm going to skip the 4th row. So I'm picking up 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3 in every 4 rows. So I skip the 4th row. That way I only have 3 stitches coming out of 4 rows worth of fabric. Skip the 4th. So in 1, 2, 3, and skip the 4th, etc. And so whether you have, again, if you have a rib stitch at the side of your work, you still have rows. If you have double moss, you still have rows there. They all exist still. Like, even though I have texture here, there are still rows that I can pick up in little holes. So you kind of have to think a little bit outside the box in that way. Some people panic because the stitch texture has changed, but each stitch still makes rows. With garter stitch, the ratio of 3 to 4 does not apply. Here, the ratio is 1 to 2. For every 2 rows of garter stitch, we get this groovy ridge. So I'm going to insert my needle into every ridge and pick up 1. So there's 1, 2. So for each ridge, I'm picking up 1 stitch. And you can kind of, let's see, I'll pick up a couple more so you can see it. But here we go. So this ridge has a stitch, this ridge has a stitch, and there are valleys between the ridge. So sometimes I refer to these as mountains and valleys. You're not picking up in the valley. You're only picking up in one of the two. So you could pick up in the valley, but then not in the mountain. You're just picking up 1 stitch for every valley mountain combo, essentially, because the valley is the knit row on the right side and the mountain is the knit row on the wrong side. So for every 2 rows, every 1 mountain, you're picking up 1 stitch for garter. And that helps keep the ratio of rows to stitches appropriate and equal so that you don't get any puckering or pulling of your front band. So I mentioned just a moment ago that I recommend putting a marker at the back center neck. That is because even though I have this nifty ratio for you and the way to pick up kind of naturally so that you don't have to give too much thought to it, I still want you to have equal numbers of stitches on each side of the cardigan. So let's say you picked up 200 up to the center back neck, which I hope you didn't. That's a lot of stitches. Probably would be more like, I don't know, 80 or 90. You're picking up to that center of the back. You want to make sure that by the time you get here, you've picked up that same number. So maybe you have to skip a stitch here or there, or pick up an extra one where you maybe would have previously skipped, just to get it to be even so that you don't have, again, I'll go with the big numbers, 100 stitches on one side and 130 on the other. That would be strange, and you'd end up with an elongated front. So those are just some of the little things that that I worked into the pattern to help make it all come together neatly. So you can see my sweaters, for the most part, lay at the same point, and that's because I made sure that on each side I had the same number of stitches for the front band. But Wynn, I loved what you did for the collar, and I'll just reiterate this for anyone who missed it. So what Wynn did was she found that center back neck and then increased from, say, here to there and there to there to create a bit of a flare back, like a shawl collar. Oh yeah, you've got it on. Hold on, I'm gonna spotlight you.
The other thing I did too, Sheena, is I did pick up on an 8. So I picked up every stitch, and then in the garter, I picked up more, but I wanted a firmer button band because I changed the shape of the sweater. And I was afraid that if I didn't make it more stitches on the button band, that I might lose control of the shape.
Yes.
So it worked out for me, but yeah, here's the collar. So it started, I'd say about halfway down the arm.
So pretty. I love
And I
it.
could have gone more or thrown in some short rows too, if you wanted it bigger.
Yes, totally. That's what I assumed it was at first, again, because of the way it was folded back, but I really liked that it was just the increasing that did that. And for anyone curious about what Wynn did, she used a smaller size needle for her border to give it a denser feel. It's so pretty. And we discussed it in the Ravelry group for the knit along, so you can check that out too. It's so pretty.
Thanks.
The suggestions, yeah, because you didn't have a long enough needle, correct? That was the issue.
Well, that and I wanted to make sure that the shape would hold. I felt like the sweater, because I changed the shape of it, I needed more structure through the button band to maintain the shape change.
Got it.
To unify it more somehow.
Secure it. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
It's so fabulous. Oh my gosh. Very, very cool. Well, here, I'm going to take myself and you off of Spotlight. That way we can all just kind of chat as a group. Here we go. I'm going to gallery view it. Yay. So does anyone else want to show and tell? What have you got working? Harriet, how are you doing? Good to see you. Oh, there we go.
I'm fine. I was out looking for Passover,
Oh,
which are non-existent this year.
yeah, I can't find good matzah. Anyway, these are my issues.
That's about all they have here.
Yeah, that's all they had was my niece was very sweet at her bat mitzvah this year. She made a comment about this dessert I make for Passover for the Seder. So I feel like I have to make it this year since she brought it up at her during her bat mitzvah speech. So that's high on my list.
The chocolate coated matzah thing?
We call it matzah crack. Yes, it's matzah with a glaze of like toffee and then melted chocolate on top, and then you can put salted almonds on too, but my son has a nut allergy, so I usually just leave it at the chocolate and it's perfect. But this year I might do peanuts. We'll see. I don't know. Anyway, we'll see what happens. But yikes, Harriet. So you've been out hunting the Passover stuff. Have you had knitting time or no?
Well, no, not a lot.
Okay. Well, bummer. Well, I hope you got some good stuff out of today though, so that you'll be able to pick it up when you get there. Very cool. Does anyone else want to share progress? I'd love to see what you're up to. Let's see. Oh, Win, what's this?
At my guild, they wanted to do a specific pattern, a basic brioche beanie or something like that. So cool. That's what I'm doing. And my friend hand spun that in between color, which is kind of a lilac and a yellow.
Oh, that's beautiful. Can you show the back side of it? We'll
sure.
see it better. There you go. Love it.
So it's kind of a spring hat because here in Cleveland, it's still cold. It's like it snowed the other day, and I think it's going to snow again. Oh, so we need spring colored woolens.
Yes, to invite the sun. Exactly. Jane, wow, look at your sweater. Holy moly. Oh, wait, you're muted. If you could just click the unmute. Let's see. There you go.
Okay. I'm going to put buttons on later. So it's coming, I'm going to have button loops, maybe like 6 buttons coming down. And this is like the set and sleeve here that I'm sewing. This one's finished. So
magnificent.
I finished the sleeves. And I have leftover yarn for your sweater, but I'll have to do it on a smaller gauge. And right now I'm making buttons. I'm in buttons pockets. I'm doing slanted pockets to go inside.
So
like,
cool.
So there'll be zigzags in here. So,
that is awesome. Oh,
so I can't wait to finish it. So,
I bet it's so beautiful though. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So and the best thing is I found, where are they? Some vintage buttons I had from my great aunt to put on it. And let me see if I can find them here. Like these old Bakelite buttons.
Very cool. I love looking at vintage buttons whenever I go to the trade shows, or, you know, like the knitting shows. Sometimes there are people that sell the vintage buttons. They're so cool.
Now I'm trying to find it. I've had them for years, and I always wanted to put them on something, but I didn't know what. So they're like this. Cool. So it would be like little balls like this.
So cool.
And then have a dark loop to going across it. So, I mean, I'll finally get to use them, which is really fun. So
that's really wonderful, and I'm excited that you have leftover yarn too. Because
I do. I've probably a couple of skeins, right? But it's all DK, so I'll have to, you know, I have enough DK. I could, if I to make a DK, I could use 2 fingerings probably.
You could, yeah, you could hold 2 fingering strands together. Yeah. I think in the pattern I say hold a DK with a fingering, and then you get the chunky gauge that I called for. But certainly, if you wanted to switch it over,
you know, we'll see. Yeah, but anyway, once I finish this, I'll get your pattern and do one with the different. And also, I don't know how long they are, but I have a lot of needlepoint yarn lying around, so I could put in as different colored strands.
Absolutely, so, and especially if they're textured and things like that, because I know I've had like velour needlepoint yarns and sparkles and things like that. Just a little shot of texture and color would be phenomenal.
It'll be well. There's a lot of very shiny yarns that are very, very thin, so you could almost use them like a hold along thing with it.
Totally.
So,
oh my gosh, the wheels are turning now again. This is dangerous.
So,
okay.
When I get one of yours done, I'll put it up on the Ravelry then. So,
Thank you. Yes. And
okay, great.
thank you all. And for anyone who did knit the sweater or has it in progress, please put up the pictures on Ravelry in your project page and link them, or even just in our group so I can see them, because I am in love with this sweater. Every time I see your sweaters, I want to knit another one. It's, I guess, a good problem to have. So thank you all so much for being here for the knit along. I had such a nice time with you, and I can't wait for the next one. Bye.
Thanks, Shana.
Thank you, Win.